Hi everyone, my name is Brittany Scheffler, and as you may or may not know, I am the creator of the Why Should You Care project. And part of what this project is all about is to raise awareness about animal wellness, whether wild or domestic. And as you can see, while I don't have a professional studio to film this video in for you, I feel strongly enough about the rescue story that you are about to hear to simply just get it out there for you the best that I can. Mostly because the story of rescuing Bramble from the Red List is one of the most fulfilling experiences that I have ever had, but more importantly because what I learned in the process, I really know is worth sharing with you. Because through the journey, I realized just how little the public understands about the realities that animals in shelters face and the ins and outs of what being in a shelter actually means. So although the heart of this story is to tell Bramble's wonderful rescue story, I also want to shed some light on a few key things that you may or may not know about when it comes to animals in shelters across America. So the first few things I want to briefly explain to you are the difference between kill shelters and no-kill shelters, what the term red listed means, the potential impact of public support, what an animal shelter versus a rescue is, and lastly, the power of time. So before we get to Bramble's amazing rescue story, which we will, and there will be more photos than just my talking face, I will just tell you right now that it does have a happy ending. So let's break down a few of those concepts that I just listed for you before we get started. So generally there are two types of animal shelters, no-kill and kill shelters. And they can go by different names, but the defining difference between the two is pretty clear. So no-kill shelters do not use euthanasia as a means of reducing shelter populations when animals are not adopted or rescued after a certain amount of time. Kill shelters do. So animals at every shelter, however, deserve a chance at a forever home, right? And equal amounts of love. But those in line for euthanasia on the red list undoubtedly find themselves in more of a desperate situation. In fact, the ASPCA estimates that around 920,000 total cats and dogs are euthanized each year due to a lack of adoption and overpopulation in shelters who can no longer take in for their animals. So those would be the kill shelters. Let me just reiterate that. 920,000 cats and dogs are killed because they are not adopted every year. So how do you know whether a shelter practices euthanasia or not? Quite simply, do your research, ask. But generally speaking, unless otherwise stated as a no-kill shelter, they most likely are. However, let me tell you, this should not deter you from considering adopting from or volunteering at such shelters. Because if anything, it should further implore you to do so. Because the animals at those shelters where they are facing euthanasia, their lives are immediately on the line, as well as those that may be brought in the days ahead should there not be any room for them. So, it makes sense. Until animals are adopted and fostered at higher rates, these shelters need all the support, the volunteering, and the advocacy that they can get. And if you don't want to do it for the shelter itself, please consider doing it for the animals whose lives depend on it. Red listed means that an animal is on what we might understand as death row. They have been categorized in such a way that unless adopted by a specific date, they will be euthanized. Now, this might be due to shelter overpopulation, the age of the animal, its breed, special needs, or in Bramble's case, which we'll talk about later on, a perceived personality assessment that really reduced his likelihood of adoption, not to mention some of the behaviors he did show adopters while he was in the shelter. And we'll talk about that. So how do you know what animals are red listed at a shelter, or those that are in danger of being put on the red list? Again, quite simply, call or visit the shelter and ask. Get specific. This information is not often displayed clearly on shelter websites for obvious yet frustrating reasons, because I feel, this is just me, if the public were to understand the fate of thousands of red-listed animals that they face each day, maybe more adoptions and considerations for doing so would be given. And if nothing else, maybe more advocacy to share the stories of red-listed animals might be taken, like was the case with Bramble. So all shelters, especially those that euthanize red-listed animals, really need volunteers, fosters, and advocacy. Why? Well, because the animals in these shelters live each day in extremely stressful conditions. and a lack of volunteering reduces the chances of sheltered dogs or cats getting taken out of their enclosures, dogs for walks each day, getting loved on, and given a break from the overstimulation that they often face in shelters. Such overstimulation can lead to stress-induced behaviors such as pacing, excessive barking, aggressiveness, and depression, to name just a few. Now, these behaviors aren't always normal for the dog or the cat to exhibit, but unfortunately, they do deter them from appealing to potential adopters who visit them at the shelter. So, for example, it would be like a teacher basing your entire semester's grade off of the one test that you failed, not because you weren't capable, but because you just happened to have to take it on the most stressful and distracted day possible. It wouldn't be an accurate assessment of your potential or your ability. And this is often the same for animals in shelters, and sadly, why many are often eventually euthanized. So in my opinion, we have to learn to look past the cage and into the heart of the animal behind it, knowing that with the proper care, even the most problematic of cats, dogs, whatever other animal it may be, can change. So what's the difference between an animal shelter and an animal rescue? Well, in some cases, a capable animal rescue organization can function as both, providing enclosures for rescued animals who await fosters or adopters. However, most often they are separate entities. So an animal shelter takes animals in off the streets through owner surrenders and so forth. They are generally city-run and seek out local rescues to build good relationships with to help increase adoptions from the shelter. So shelters are generally the places that more often have red-listed animals and where you can visit lost and found animals in your city. Now, animal rescues more often partner with these shelters to help reduce the number of animals red-listed by taking animals out of the shelters when they can. However, in certain cases, rescues cannot pull animals from shelters unless they already have committed fosters or adopters lined up. Now, this is not always the case, but when it does happen, it further pushes the need for fosters and adopters to step up at their shelters and rescues. So, again, what's the best way to find out more about how a rescue or a shelter near to you functions? Go ahead and give them an ask, reach out, find out for yourself. But what I learned in Bramble's particular case, given his labeling at the shelter, was that unless a foster or adopter stepped up, an animal rescue could not even commit to helping him. Therefore, he could not be taken from the shelter and thus remained on the red list until this happened. So I personally found this quite frustrating, but different shelters respond in different ways. The greatest asset you can give red-listed animals truly is time. Never underestimate either the power of social media in helping animals in need find this time. Yes, it is overwhelming to realize just how many animals need help and awareness on a daily basis. But as one of my favorite conservationists, Pat Craig, says, saving one animal might not change the world, but surely for that one animal, the world will change forever. So the fight I put forth for Bramble went viral across social media platforms because I chose to speak up. And I found that people from all backgrounds, beliefs, and geographies united to get him the help he, like all other cats and dogs in shelters, deserve. And I was astounded at how in a time of such divisiveness, so many people put aside their differences and took the time to share Bramble's story. And personally, I think this is the beautiful thing about animals of all kinds. They bring out the sides of us that nothing in this world can. They make taking action easy, and they draw boundary lines of what is acceptable and what is not almost immediately. They provide us with clarity that is often impossible to establish in other areas of human life and politics, let's be honest. Animals really bring out the best in us, and as I learned, can teach us more than we ever thought possible about each other and our own strengths. Now, it's my hopes that all this new knowledge that I just shared with you and Bramble's rescue story to come, which is just happening around the corner, inspire hope and action within you, not sadness. I hope that his rescue story just increases your understanding of how important adopting animals from shelters truly is. That is the point of this message. So regardless, I feel, of how we approach animal care, because different shelters, rescues, nonprofits do, whether it's a shelter that is kill or no kill, or however it functions, I truly believe that we have to maximize and focus on the love we all hold for the animals despite the circumstances they are in. Pointing fingers at each other, no matter where you're at in the process, writing animals and others off, and remaining blind to the truth is going to get us all nowhere, and it's not going to get animals off the red list. And these animals are the very ones that deserve the love they give us, reciprocated tenfold. So, with all that said, now that you've got that juicy bit of information, hopefully you understand things a little bit more, let's get on to Bramble's rescue story. So for purposes of anonymity, I've omitted certain organizational and individual names from the remainder of the story. And also, I just want to let you know that I want to go into a little more depth on the journey itself to help paint the picture the best I can for you. So here we go. Having been a board member on a local humane education and advocacy nonprofit, we regularly received information on red-listed animals from a nearby shelter. So Bramble in particular was brought to my attention in a specific text message, and upon learning his story, I began one of the most impactful animal rescue missions of my life. One that actually turned out to be a huge team effort, and as you may already know, did lead to a very happy ending for Bramble. But what I thought would be a pretty straightforward task of getting him adopted turned out to be weeks of tireless, frustrating, and also very inspiring work. So Bramble was an estimated 2-year-old, beautiful German Shepherd, red-listed due to his aggressive behavior in the shelter. And at the time of my learning about Bramble, he had just 11 days before his euthanasia date. 11 days left to live. And now, if that doesn't make you take action, I don't know what will. So knowing if I didn't do everything I could to get this wonderful animal out of the shelter, I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. I just imagined him standing in his enclosure, not knowing that in just less than 2 weeks, his time was up. And the reality is, guys, that this is no different from the situations that thousands of animals in shelters are facing as you listen to my words. So immediately I started posting about Bramble on social media. I shared of the urgency, photos of him, and that we needed an adopter or foster as soon as possible. And I'm not kidding you, over the span of just a day, my direct message inbox on Instagram had never been more full, filled with messages from people wanting to help, expressing their support, and inquiring about any updates. So after a few days, Bramble's red-listed story, to my surprise, had spread over thousands of different platforms, and people I had never known, celebrities, and people in other countries were resharing his story with their followers. Another amazing part of this rescue journey was the number of new friends I made, some of them lifelong, as now we worked, or at the time we worked together to give Bramble his best chance at life possible. So after starting the social media fire, you could call it, I was referred to Jeannie Perales, the founder of Foster to Forever, and Bramble's main caretaker at the shelter. Jeannie informed me that in order for Bramble to be considered for adoption, any parties interested must come meet and interact with him at least 3 times given his particular behavior. And furthermore, that we would also need to find a committed rescue to support any potential adoption. So this was the first time I learned about the intricacies of getting animals with certain behaviors off the red list and up for adoption. And although at the time it felt like a blow to the momentum I had going, I just did not let it stop the search. So while the social media campaign continued, I started reaching out by email and phone call to as many local German Shepherd and animal rescues that I could. I was going crazy for this dog, hoping that any one of them would be willing to get Bramble out of the shelter or to at least sponsor and support anyone interested in adopting him. So the days ticked by and Bramble's euthanasia date was closing in. And the love I felt for Bramble was supernatural. I literally could not sleep or focus on anything else during the days leading up to his euthanasia. Hey guys, so yeah, not one of my finest looking moments, but just some real talk. I just wanted to say, number one, today is a highly stressful but great day. Number two, thank you to everyone who has helped spread the word about Bramble. It's been amazing to just see everyone get on board and help. So thank you. It really does prove that, there's so much going on in the world, but when we join forces and we can actually be on the same team, change can happen. So thank you to everyone. Every little message, post, tag, whatever it is a little ripple in a really big pond, and you never know what it's gonna do to the next ripple. So keep fighting for Bramble. There's a lot of animals in the shelters right now because of COVID. There's a lot of owner surrenders. People are giving their pets up. They're either going back to work or they can't handle them like they thought they could. I just got off a call this morning with a shelter manager who is just overwhelmed by having to make these decisions that nobody wants to make. So keep spreading the word. Your voice does matter. I don't care how many followers you have or who you are. This little part of this crying rant. Adopt, guys. Don't shop. It's really simple. There's so many animals literally depend on it. Literally. Bramble has 7 days. 7 days, guys, until the red list runs its course. So it just did not seem fair to me that this young, healthy, smart dog was not being given the healthy circumstances he needed to show his true colors to those at the shelter and potential adopters. And again, this is the same for so many animals. But eventually, one specific rescue was willing to come look at Bramble. The rest that I got in touch with did either not respond or were too full at the time to consider taking in or supporting another dog with behaviors like Bramble. So as you can imagine, when one rescue responded with interest, it was like a glass of cold water to my boiling blood. And additionally, having learned that a rescue was interested in Bramble, the shelter he was at extended his euthanasia date another week. This was a huge win, buying him time. So with high hopes, I awaited feedback from Jeannie, who would be at the shelter when individuals from the rescue group came to look at Bramble. I checked my email later that day only to find out that the rescue was interested in potentially taking 2 other German Shepherds from the shelter. Bramble was not one of them. I was crushed, but again, not giving up. We are knocked down, but we are not knocked out. And I can't wait to see this success story when it's done, because that's what it's going to be. I have full faith. Bramble? So Jeannie and I continued to work hard at spreading Bramble's story and reaching out to rescues, and I cannot explain how many DMs of interest I received from people interested in adopting Bramble, only for them to lose interest upon hearing about the process of going to meet him several times and working with a rescue throughout his adoption process. And this too frustrated me. If he was not worth the work to get adopted safely, how would he then be cared for in a forever home? Alternatively, if this process deterred potential fosters and adopters, is it something that we might want to consider adapting or changing? Because the truth is, I quickly learned that as much as we want to get animals out of shelters, we must also ensure that they get into proper care of committed families that they deserve. Otherwise, we risk the process starting all over again. So what I found is that it's one thing to want to help, and it's really another to be all in. 3 different families went to visit with Bramble as a product of the social media sharing. The first visited 3 times and interacted extremely positively with him. They even had German Shepherds of their own in the past, which gave them some additional experience. But when it came time to commit, for reasons not shared, they backed out. And the second and third families, after multiple visits, simply decided it wasn't the right time. But by now, Bramble's second euthanasia date was quickly approaching again, and I learned another hard lesson. Do not let your excitement determine your effort. It's easy to take action when things look good. When things look bad, excitement is little to none, and therefore, such feelings cannot be the driver of action. Anchoring yourself in purpose, however, will take you farther than high expectations ever will. I also learned we have to be grateful for progress, but ultimately save the celebrating for when it's all said and done. As the social media wave continued, Bramble was brought to the attention of one of my now great friends, Alex Prang. So Alex, like myself, was determined to help as much as possible in the continued fight as opportunities seemed to be decreasing for Bramble's rescue. Alex even went to visit with Bramble and see about adoption for himself. However, living at the time with some indecisive roommates in LA did not prove the most fitting situation for Bramble or for Alex. However, Alex's support in getting the word out and buying him time, given his following, was integral to the overall success of this rescue. So, Jeannie and I continued to work despite the situation to find Bramble a rescue and an adopter. And eventually we were closing on just about 4 days from his euthanasia date before we both realized we would need to look elsewhere for help. Immediate adoption or rescue was just not in the cards for Bramble. So desperate, I reached out to the amazing John Rammer at Kindness Ranch Sanctuary in Wyoming. John and I have worked together over several years on various animal wellness projects, and he's one of the few animal care professionals who I have found truly means what they say and really doesn't often take no for an answer. So I hopped on a call, and not 5 minutes into sharing Bramble's story with John, he simply paused and said, "Brittany, well, let's get him to Kindness Ranch." This was probably now the 6th, 7th, or 8th time along what was now almost a month-long rescue mission that I broke down in tears, but this time they were happy ones. However, the work was not over. Without going into all the fine print, Bramble was in Long Beach, California. Kindness Ranch is in Wyoming. Kindness acts as a special kind of sanctuary, not a rescue. So in order for Bramble's current shelter to be able to properly release him to Kindness Ranch, we still needed a committed adopter and a committed rescue to step in. So the series of steps took a lot of planning and quick thinking on Jeannie, John, and myself's part. But thanks to the support and understanding of another amazing rescue group called Wolf Project, we secured a willing temporary rescue to get Bramble out of the shelter. So the plan strategically but seamlessly unfolded from there. Once Wolf Project and Jeannie removed Bramble from the shelter, an amazing human with years of experience in handling German Shepherds was able to drive him on a 2-day road trip to Wyoming. However, we still needed a temporary adopter to sign the papers in order for Wolf Project to release Bramble from their care. So, of course, I volunteered for this part of the journey, and how sweet it felt for Bramble to be mine, even if for just a few short moments before I signed him over to Kindness Ranch and sent him on his way to Wyoming. The entire mission, from his removal from the shelter, the signing of all the paperwork, and his trip to Wyoming, was planned and executed over the span of roughly 5 days. Now, if this isn't proof that a committed group of like-minded individuals can get the impossible done, I don't know what is. And the team effort that is required and the drive to save Bramble that I saw, I have not yet seen in any other professional job or volunteer position I have ever had, and I've had many. It was as if someone switched a flip in our brains, allowing us to put any differences and competing emotions aside, and there were a lot of those, in order to accomplish what needed to be done. And I'm forever grateful and awed by the grace and the teamwork that John, Wolf Project, Jeannie, Alex, myself, and a few other individuals who I won't specifically name were able to create. So we received photo updates from Bramble's caretaker and driver from the minute he was taken from the shelter and throughout his journey to Wyoming. And one of the best moments was seeing Bramble eagerly walk from the shelter to the car that he would quite literally take to a new life. It was as if he knew something different was happening this time, as he jumped into the back of the car only to stick his head out of the window and what looked like smile and say, "Bye guys."
Oh, good boy, Bramble. Good boy. Yeah, you're free. Oh my gosh. Okay, here goes our boy, riding in style. There he goes. Woohoo! There's Volunteer Gary.
Talk about a happy boy and some very happy people waving him off.
Volunteers, Brittany, Alex, you guys are awesome. Gary, you've been incredible. Ricky and Dee, you've exercised our boy Bramble. Thank you so much. I'm so overwhelmed. Thank you.
By his first night out of the shelter, he was already acting like a completely different dog. we discovered that outside of the stressful distractions present at the shelter, he was very eager to behave and even listen to commands.
Hey, you want some hot dog? Do you want some more food? Sit. Sit. Good boy. Good boy. You're a handsome man.
His entire demeanor changed from hyperactive to focused, curious, and excited. And his first night on the road, he even decided to sleep with his driver in a comfy hotel bed, play with some toys, and enjoy life outside of a cage before finishing the last leg of the trip. Now, let me remind you, this was a dog that was set to be euthanized due to his shelter-induced, partly overly aggressively behavior and a lack of adoption or interest in him, therefore. So seeing photos and videos of Bramble along his journey to freedom, acting like the happy, much kinder dog, was probably one of the best feelings I have ever experienced in my life. But nothing topped his arrival to Kindness Ranch in late winter, where he was greeted with some winter snow, freedom, and comfort in a place where he could never again be placed on a red list.
Oh, running already. You're running so good already.
I know. I don't want you anymore. Go. I was amazed with him in the motel.
It was not long after his arrival to Kindness that he was also able to adjust to his new home and work with dog behaviorists to help train and heal any remaining stress-induced aggression. And around this time is when I got the call from John, informing me that he and the team at Kindness decided that with his fresh new start, Bramble needed a new name as well. They chose Nayati, which quite perfectly is Hindi for destiny. And what a perfect name for a new beginning it was. Nayati is a completely different dog now that he's out of the shelter in Long Beach. And in a way, I too feel it was my destiny to help complete this rescue mission, as it opened up so many doors of new knowledge, friendships, growth, and fire in my bones to continue doing what I can to advocate for fostering, adopting, and just getting animals off the red list. So Nayati now enjoys expansive areas of land to roam at Kindness and to play in. And some of his favorite things to do are to play with his toys and the other rescue dogs at the ranch, something before he could not confidently do. He enjoys chasing bubbles of all things, napping, running in expansive areas of land, and time with his caretakers. So to say that Nayati has come a long way is an understatement, not only in geography, but in behavior, trainability, and love for open spaces. And while he's perfectly able to live out his life in the beautiful flowing hills of Wyoming, he is also still available for adoption. However, adoption into a home where he can continue to have open areas to play, love, and the proper training and care he needs to enjoy his new life. Now, John regularly sends me updates of Nayati to this day, and the feeling I get when I see his furry face pop up on my text makes even the hardest of days better. This rescue mission taught me that there are good people in this world, and that even the most problematic of dogs or cats deserves a chance at life outside of a shelter. One where they can be given the chance to be their true selves, free of overstimulation, misled labels, receive training, and most importantly, not face a death sentence. Now, my hope is that Nayati's story has educated you more on the reality that animals in shelters often face and the complicated process of getting them out, all that could be reduced simply by adoption. I hope that all of this has furthered you to desire to adopt, or to at least share the importance of adoption with your friends and family. And if you can't adopt, fostering is a huge help to open up room in shelters and to provide these animals with less stressful conditions so that they can put their best foot forward for adopters. Because right now in the United States alone, shelters are overflowing with animals, just like Nayati, who are in need of rescuing before their time is unfairly up. And I can attest firsthand that the love you will receive from a rescued pet, whether a cat or a dog, is unlike that of any other. So individually, guys, each of us can make a huge difference in the world of an animal, but collectively, that will make a huge impact in shelter numbers across the nation. So I just encourage you to do a little research before adopting a cat or a dog on basic care needs so that you are prepared and confident in choosing your next best friend. And consider that animals outside of shelters might behave entirely different once shown the love and freedom that they desire, as Nayati showed us. Find out where your local shelter is, ask them how you can help or volunteer if you can't foster or adopt, and if nothing else, be willing to advocate and share the stories of animals in need, like Brambles, aka Nayatis, when you have the opportunity. I just want to remind you to please never underestimate your influence. And also, remember, please share what you learned in this story with all you can, because the more we can educate ourselves about the realities of shelter animals, the more we can create change. So if you would like, head on over to Instagram and give me a follow at Brittany Ray, where I try to post as much animal advocacy and helpful motivation that I can throughout the weeks. And thank you most of all for believing in your power to make a difference in the life of an animal.